Good morning. I'm Nick McCrae, Chair of TCHC's board, the board's Building, Investment, Finance, and Audit Committee. Welcome to the public session of today's committee meeting. Let me begin with an acknowledgement that the land each of us is on as we hold this virtual meeting, I should say hybrid meeting, is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I'd like to start off with a declaration of any conflict of interest from any committee members on any of the agenda items for today. Would any committee members like to bring forward any conflicts of interest? Seeing none, we'll move forward with the approval of the public agenda items and ask for items be held for discussion. Yes?
I'd like to hold items 7 and 8, please.
I'll also hold 9B and 12. Any other items to be held by committee members for discussion? Okay, I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda with the items held. Thank you, John. Seconder. Thank you, Naram. All in favor? Carried. Next item is confirmation of the public meeting minutes of the November 2nd, 2023 November 2nd and November 22nd meetings. Can I have someone motion that? Thank you, John. Seconder. Thank you, Naram. All in favor? Carried. Item 5, business arising. Are there any questions on the business arising? If not, I'll ask for a motion to receive that. Thank you, John. Seconder. Thank you, Naram. All in favor? Carried. The first held item, I believe, is item 7. And we have a deputation.
Good morning. First of all, apologize for interrupting your public or private session. There was no sign at the door. It's important for communications that we put a sign at the door that says we're in camera. Anyway, my name is Miguel Avila. I'm a TCHC tenant in good standing and in the lease agreement. My home is Regent Park. I am proud to say that I have been doing this activism work since the year 2010, coming to TCHC board meetings, etc., etc. I'm here to speak on item 7, which is on hold for these community conversations. So page 1 says that we are going to have, in the future, 6,500 rent geared to income RGI units. Fantastic. I came to speak at City Hall, and Mayor Chow listened to me attentively, I believe, that when I spoke about increasing the membership and the governance model, you increase more participation of tenant residents to become directors, because currently the number is very low, it's very unequal, it's very unfair. So, and also I asked a question to Mayor Shaw, are going to be any RGI units for Regent Park phases 4 and 5? Because currently we are underrepresented. The TCHC voices are only 30% compared to 70%, which are market rent owners or renters. So we want to see a stabilization of that balance, so perhaps if we throw in another 4,000 RGI units, maybe we can accomplish a goal. So I have come always to bring new information and also past information that is so important for you guys, such as safety, fire safety. And I'm gonna read from the text. It says, hold on a second. The community engagement on page 7 and planning approvals will start with capturing community feedback, including needed services, amenities, tenant economic development priorities, and design considerations. So, on that regards, one of the things that we have failed to address is the lack of CCTV cameras in Region Park phases 1 and 2. We made the request to TCHC board in the year 2018 when we lost Michael Jackson. He was only 14 years old. And where? To 30 Sackville Street. They only have cameras on the main floors. They don't have cameras on every floor else. And in phases 3, all the buildings have CCTV cameras on every floor. Next, e-bikes and fire danger. So we have heard a lot of times how dangerous it is to have e-bikes and bring it into your units, and then, faulty batteries cause fires. So what we have in 220 Oak Street, we have a beautiful, I'm going to put it on the screen, perhaps my good friends from can allow it for you guys to see my point. It's coming soon. All right, here we go. So you see, this is an enclosure that was completed in 2022 after unfortunately, 2 e-bikes that belonged to my girlfriend, my former girlfriend and I were stolen out of 220 Oak. So we have an enclosure. Fantastic. Where are the e-bikes? You wonder, it's 2024. We don't have an e-bike policy, my friends. We submitted, believe it or not, we tenants are smart. We submit a proposal to management. Here is our policy, and I submitted to Sonia, my region deputation, and it explains what are the things to happen if we ever consider to have an e-bike policy. Because again, we had to save dangers of fires, explosions in our units, the loss of life perhaps. So the best solution is provide e-bikes in the future developments. As we are talking increasing housing, we must ensure that e-bike enclosures are found to provide safety for our tenants. And you care about safety, correct? How long am I speaking? I don't see the timer, the clock. Is it 5 minutes already up? Yeah, 20 seconds. I got 20 seconds left. Okay, so I'm going to use my time to say the following. Tridel, TCHC, please come back to the table. Region Park needs you to come back to the table, continue the conversations in the implementation of the $26.8 million community benefits agreement. So please be a good fellow, good neighborhood. Come to the meeting next week. We're inviting you. We're gonna throw food and join us. And so we can conclude our hard work we have put in this community, and perhaps the ombudsman can be a referee in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation, and I think certainly in regards to new developments and new housing, the development team should absolutely be considering sort of all forms of transportation and the evolution of that over the next number of years as we develop new buildings and design and plan them. So thank you for your deputation. Any questions from the committee members regarding the deputant's presentation?
Just want to add to say that e-bike policy is important for the superintendents before assigning a locker. Without it, they say, I'm lost, my friend. I don't know what to do. Help me, help me. Come to the TCHC board.
Thank you.
All right, I deliver my message.
We'll now move into discussion on item 7. John, I believe you were the first to hold that.
I did. And so my first question on this initiative is, do we assume that the mayor and council are looking to add to TCHC's portfolio of units? So we have roughly 50,000 units. Are they looking to add more units under TCHC's responsibility? Or are these units, will the building of these units lie somewhere else?
Through the chair to the director, I'll start to answer that, and Jessica certainly has been a part of the working group at the city, which would have more detail. But at this point in time, with the work is looking at sites and due diligence, and then to the point of what is capable within those sites, certainly we would be optimistic that there would be more of a role for TCHC in those locations, possible locations.
So that doesn't answer my question. My question is, are they, so they may be on TCHC sites. TCHC may have a role in the development of those sites.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that TCHC will necessarily, in the end, be the owner of those properties. And has the city signaled to TCHC that as part of this mandate to build more houses, that TCHC will have responsibility for more units in the end? Has the city said that to TCHC?
Jessica?
Through the chair, perhaps I can jump in on this one. So I would say that's definitely one of the options in terms of delivering more housing urgently on these sites that we are identifying. I expect there'll be a variety of delivery methodologies and operation methodologies that are used, but one of them in which we don't know yet exactly how it'll unfold, but we do expect that one of the considerations will be an increase of units for TCHC will be one of the options on the table as we're looking at them. But I would say it is undefined at this point, whether it'll be adding to TCHC's portfolio or operated by another third party. It is still to be determined. So
can you tell me, and because I should know the answer to this because I've been around long enough, but I don't know, what happened in Regent Park? Because Regent Park was our property, and we intensified Regent Park. But did we add, with the revitalization of Regent Park, did we add units to our responsibility?
Through the chair, yes, we did. We added through previous phases and through future phases. We have added net new affordable units as part of the Regent Park revitalization.
And so
we've increased the total number of units.
We have increased the total number of units. Okay, and is that also going to be the case up at Lawrence Heights?
Likely, when, through the chair, when we're looking at the revitalization, we also look at the mix and the tenure within the individual buildings that are being redeveloped. And one of the goals of the revitalization is to bring a better mix, both in our buildings and in the community as a whole. So often that does include adding new affordable units and housing opportunities in our buildings. So I would say that is definitely part of the planning process for phase 2 of Lawrence Heights.
So when we partner up with another company to build more units and further intensify the site, do they ever assume an ongoing role with the building that's being built? So we're like maybe you could give the example of Regent Park and tell me, what happened there and what's happening up at Lawrence Heights. Are there buildings being built? Are there units being built where they still maintain control of the units? The partner?
So that's a great question. Through the chair, we are seeing that different type of model. I mean, remember the earlier phases of Lawrence Heights and for Regent Park, those were established quite a number of years ago. Those are predominantly TCHC housing with mixed apartment or condominiums. The newer communities like Don Somerville, it is a community that has a mix of rental on the market side, affordable on the market side, and TCHC rental, as well as condominiums. So as we're kind of planning forward, we are seeing a larger mix both on the private side and on the public side.
So how does it work then if it's our land, if it's land that's owned by the city, and yet there's a private partner? I mean, just tell me, I don't need to know all of these, but how does it work that they own the condominium and then they sell the units in the condominium, but it's on TCHC land? Is that what happens?
Great question. Through the chair, the way that our deals are typically been structured historically is that there's actually a land sale component to it. So there is a transfer of land ownership and it is transferred to the operator or to the condominium per se. But part of this report that's in front of you today is looking at different tenures and different opportunities on city-owned and TCHC-owned land to further the mandates of the urgently build more homes report from city councils. That's part of the alignment piece that we'll be looking at.
Thank you. And what is in terms of us identifying properties, what is the timeline for this?
Through the chair, it's a very fast timeline. There's different types of properties within the pipeline. There are the properties that are our construction-ready sites. So those are the ones that are in our in-flight projects that are already identified and been approved by the board, and in most cases by council through planning approvals, et cetera. And then we have a list of potential sites. Those potential sites is a long list of sites that require extensive due diligence to determine whether they are appropriate for revitalization or for infill properties. We've been developing that list for a number of years. The development division has always got kind of a list that has ongoing work happening on it. We are accelerating the review of that list as part of this report, and initial report backs to the city are for their Q2 report of 2024. So
by the end of June,
the coming months.
By the end of June, probably.
That's correct.
They'll have a list. And so I would gather, will that list be made public, or will it be kept confidential until further decisions are made?
Through the chair, that list will be very high level. So until it's determined that they are feasible from the city and by TCHC, it's likely the list will remain confidential until it is moved into a go forward release.
Yeah, because so I guess the concern would be that if we identify, I mean, the concern this will happen, that once we identify sites for intensification, I mean, we may have to move people out, and they may have to find more, accommodation while sites are rebuilt. And I would expect that there's only so much capacity that we have. When we moved people out of Regent Park, did they for rebuilding? Did they go into other TCHC units, or did they go to other? They all went to TCHC units?
So through the chair, our revitalization program, which has been developed over a number of years, is one that is a commitment to our tenants to relocate them within TCHC's housing stock. And it's a very kind of fulsome process that engages with the households and assists them through the moving process and the matching process with a new unit. It's very well established, and it's something that the team does very well. But as part of this report, I want to flag that some of the opportunities that we are looking at are infill opportunities, which is something that hasn't been a focus of our, or a centralized focus of our work. Infill projects don't necessarily require the relocation of households. So it's looking at lands that are undeveloped or underutilized and looking for opportunities where additional housing can be added without relocations being required. That said, we also have direction to continue with our revitalization program as a whole. So there are properties as well that look at future phases or future revitalization projects. But both types of projects are being looked at.
Great. Okay, thank you. Because I would think there's obviously a certain upper limit that we can, in terms of moving people out, and while buildings are torn down and rebuilt, there's certainly an upper limit to what we can handle. And then I think. My last question deals with, in recommendation 3, it talks about development and growth services explore options to enhance the financial viability of Toronto community housing, in-flight and planned revitalization and infill products or infill projects. Will we be looking at, is it likely that we'll be looking at more units that will be market rent units, as opposed to, of course, the mix was already put there. Will there be some flexibility in that, or is obviously financially we're better off with more market units than heavily subsidized units? So in terms of what
through the chair. Yes, it's a great question, and it's part of the work that we're doing with the city and with PRATO as we look at our in-flight revitalization projects and looking at the balance of, you're 100% correct, of revenues that are coming in through those market partnerships, but also looking at maximizing the amount of new affordable rental housing that we can add to the project. So it's really a balancing act of those revenues, both from financing and also from the developer partnerships themselves.
Great. Okay, that's all my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I think in total, and Brian, I'll go to you next, but in total, the concept is accelerating the TCHC's activities in looking for opportunities to increase density and housing, broadly speaking, and affordable, replacing existing and upgrading, increasing affordable, and ultimately potentially increasing market, are options. But right now, step one is what is the opportunity set and how do we bring those forward? And obviously it's very complicated as it relates to tenant relocation and so on, but that's all part of the bigger plan once we have sort of the idea of what the opportunity set looks like, if that summarizes it well. Brian, over to you.
I just wanted to make sure that there is an assumption that there will be the same number of RGI units. They're not looking at increasing the RGI units. Is that correct?
Through the chair, excellent question. So our replacement requirements are still fixed. So, as we take down a unit, we replace a unit, and that's part of our commitment to our revitalization program. And it's also a city requirement as part of our approvals processes when we demolish. So yes, we would be replacing those units based on the city's existing requirements for replacement of housing. So that would not change.
There won't be an increase in RGI units, and therefore affordable rental that's added will actually improve the mix that we have?
Through the chair, the mix of the units is to be determined, but the expectation is that there is an increase of all types of housing. So if we did see an additional increase of RGI housing, we would also see corresponding increases of affordable housing as well as rent geared to income housing. And the idea was that the balance would make up the net new housing. So I can't say there won't be an increase of any RGI housing because it is part of the mayor's goal to urgently build more homes is to deliver a target of RGI, but all of those RGI deliveries aren't necessarily for TCHC. And these units, just to say as well, the total target isn't to be delivered all by TCHC. There's many parties at the table, and we're an important one to deliver on these housing targets, but we're part of a much larger team to bring this to fruition.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
Through the chair, just quickly, the confirmation within this report, just for clarification for the director, 6,500 additional rent geared to income units across the city. And so when we're looking at what may actually, how that is achieved, Toronto Community Housing could in fact end up with, additional RGI beyond our current. That being said, the mayor and the group that is working, taking leadership on this project is also saying the mixed income is also a priority.
But at this stage, it's probably fair to say there's no specific commitments nor mandates nor requirements at this point, but some broad guidelines and really, again, trying to explore what's possible at this point is the way I interpret it. Any other questions on item 7? Go ahead, John.
Jessica, one other two-part question. Will you be looking at existing townhouses to see if there's an opportunity for redevelopment of those sites whereby you might replace the townhouses with a mid-rise? Is that something that would be considered?
Through the chair, yes, it would be, but that doesn't mean that all townhouse communities are going to be looked at. I mean, there are some that have adjacencies to other city-owned pieces of land or that have an ability to deliver on a larger housing target, and we will be looking at those. I would say this exercise is really looking at those sites that we can move forward quickly and effectively to deliver housing. So the focus is really about the ones that are the least encumbered. And I would say existing housing does make a site more challenging to deliver quickly.
And then my last question, which is, will you be talking to councillors about the plans or about or where the plans may go? Because, you know, councillors know their neighborhoods very well. Not that, I mean, I know that TCHC knows their neighborhoods very well, but councillors also know their neighborhoods, and they may want to bring forward suggested areas for what ostensibly will result in revitalization.
Through the chair, great question. TCHC has an approvals framework that's required as we bring projects into kind of the go forward stage. There's an initial development proposal that requires, and big important part of that is consulting with the area councillors to understand their vision for both the area and the community, and to capture that in the overall kind of vision for the property. At the forefront, I know that councillors do sometimes actively identify properties for TCHC, but I think engaging with the councillors on the properties that have been pre-identified will be a key part of our process as well.
Great. Thanks for all the answers. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions on item 7? Okay, with that, I'll ask for a motion to approve. Someone to move that motion. Thank you, John. Someone a second.
Harutza is happy to do that.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Next item 8, please. I don't recall. Is that, John, that you held that? Please go ahead.
I held that item. Shall I go, Mr. Chair?
Yep, please do.
So I note that we were notified by the province at the end of, by Supply Ontario in late 2023 of, you know, that they're going to be working on some kind of a buying agreement. And is that correct? That late 2023, the province through Supply Ontario came and said that they were going to look at an overarching buying agreement of telecom services?
2023 Supply Ontario was generated or created. Prior to that, Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, the prior name to Supply Ontario, had the Rogers contract established for a number of years, and I think it goes on for quite a bit, right? So it's an ongoing contract with Supply Ontario.
But our contract was with Rogers. I mean, were we in the midst of drafting a new RFP when this happened?
No, we've always been with Supply Ontario / MGCS.
Oh, I see. So we don't, oh, okay, this has always been the case. Oh, okay. Why did, so I note that our users went from 1,700 to 3,500. They more than doubled in the last couple of years. Can someone speak to me why that was necessary? I know some of it had to do with contract managed buildings, but why all of a sudden does, you know, that must be almost every employee at TCHC has a mobile phone.
Yep. Through the chair, I'm going to ask Tony, who's online, to respond to that question.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Great question. The reason for the numbers increasing are twofold. The first increase in change order that's been noted in the actual VAC this morning is an increase of the COVID issues of people working from home in a hybrid solution. We had to add a number of devices so that those users were able to communicate and be contacted collaboratively during that period of COVID. The second increase in number was due to our cyber security risk, in the sense that every high-level core application that was deemed necessary had to have some form of authentication against it, so that our users, in order to get access to those applications, would need some kind of device to authenticate against. And the devices that were authenticated against were cell phones. So the majority of our frontline staff were able to access a phone at that time, to which they can use an MFA type approach to authenticate against applications that they needed. Hence the reason for the increase in numbers.
So does every TCHC employee now have a company-supplied telephone?
Yes, that's correct.
And so that includes cleaning staff?
That's correct.
So prior to COVID, it wasn't considered necessary that cleaning staff, and I'm not sure what other level of, of employee, that did not need a mobile phone. And now, I mean, COVID has come and gone. Is there any sort of executive, discussion about this number? Because it's a high number, and it's costly. And for a company that really relies on a municipal subsidy to survive and keep the lights on, and it would strike me as something that would be low-hanging fruit to make a reassessment of what's necessary and what's not. Has there been any sort of discussion at executive about these numbers and whether or not it's really necessary for every single employee to have a company-supplied mobile phone?
So maybe I can start. So through the chair, I did want to comment specifically on the frontline staff that work in our buildings and the use of cell phones. So there are two factors that also make it something that we should continue to do. So we have frontline staff that are in buildings, particularly our cleaners, and it's a safety device. So they're able to access third-party security or other staff if they're dealing with any safety issues. The second reason that would support the staff continuing to have cell phones is to access the home system. So we actually use the home system to triage work orders directly to frontline staff, and we do that through our mobile devices. So certainly it isn't just because of COVID when it comes to the operations side, we use it. It's also available to the frontline staff specifically around training and cascading training to them directly, because cleaners, community maintenance people, and supers, well, supers have desktops. The cleaners don't necessarily have access to the computer system outside of that.
Well, okay, so I'm not wholly convinced that a cleaner needs a cell phone to access the home's system, but be that as may, I'll just leave those comments with you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions on this?
On that,
Go ahead.
yeah, on that note, Peruta, I just got a couple of questions as well.
Go ahead.
Can you just briefly describe the plans, like, what the basic costs and charges are for the cell phones, and how often there are overages and how those are dealt with? Can somebody go over on their data plan and then somebody gets billed? Can somebody make long distance phone calls, for example, and the company picks up the tab? How does that work?
Tony, back to you, sorry. Yeah.
But I can take that, thank you. The current plans today have unlimited voice minutes in regards to telephony, as well as there is a cost of overage that the IT team looks at monthly on the invoices to ensure that there are no numbers that have been overly increased. There are some instances where we do have overages, and they are discussed with individual teams. But right now, the actual plan itself is at $19, that it gives us unlimited voice, as well as 6 gigs of data. So that allows us to monitor those rates as we get our bills, and we continue to ensure that there is no anomalies within the bills themselves. So we do track them, we do watch them, and we do ask questions where needed.
So you're often on a monthly basis not over where you expect to be in terms of the overall net charges.
They do come in monthly, and we do watch them on a monthly basis as they come in. And again, they are monitored.
Okay, let me ask the question another way. How often
Sorry.
are you over on a monthly basis?
That's a good question. There are some instances that we are over, and again, it just depends on the month and who's doing it. Those individuals are asked and monitored as to why. But in most cases, a lot of this is due to the fact that it is business related, and like I said, it does depend. But we're pretty consistent in the cost monthly. But there are instances where we do go over.
Do you report that to us, like annually or biannually? Do we get to take a look at that, or is that something that's just normally dealt with within your budget, within your budgets, and not reported to us?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how far the reporting is done, but in instances where we do see some instances of overages, we do approach the individual's direct manager, and in regards to discussions with them to see and discuss the overages. And if the reason for the overages was business related, we kind of go ahead and approve the monthly invoice.
Right, but you don't as a practice report because I'm not familiar with this, right? So this is why I'm asking the question. These things would normally come to us, the board, in any form, either at committee or other. So they're just sort of dealt with within the budget, and we would approve kind of like the annual budget. And then it's just absorbed that way, correct?
That's correct.
If I may, through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you.
Director Pruta, it's been dealt with in the budget and also through our quarterly variance reporting within the business unit.
Okay. And I guess as by way of a last question, is it ever over? In an alarming way that you say, oh my God, what happened here, right? Do you ever get surprised that way?
We have a good relationship with Rogers today that if something of that nature does occur, they alert us right away and we investigate the issue. But to this point, we have not seen anything that's been like overly high. So.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions on this matter? I'll ask for a motion to approve. Thank you, John. Seconder?
Peruzza.
Thank you, Councillor. All in favor? Carried.
Aye.
We'll move to the next item, which is 9B, the Facilities Management Quarterly Capital Budget Update. Alan, do you mind giving us an overview?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In this report, we are seeking approval in order to ensure that we are within compliance with Financial Control Bylaw number 3, which states that we are required to report on allocations between 500 and 5 million, and then seek approval when they're over 5 million. So for this quarter, there was one, as noted in the charts, the reallocation from some of the planned categories into the demand, which we required an additional 36 million to be moved into the demand capital section so that we could have sufficient budget for those repairs that came through in the demand. As we've noted, in the report, the increasing amount of demand capital that we're seeing is noted and is noted as a concern. And we have taken steps currently and are working through them in order to ensure that the amount of demand decreases so that we have more money available for plan, because that does have a negative impact on our FCI if we have these smaller repairs. So we're working, there's a multi-divisional team that's working on it, which consists of facilities management staff, operations staff, finance staff, to review what we can do in order to limit the amount of demand spending in 2024. I will also point out for 2024, we have been more reasonable and hopefully more accurate with what we've put into the 2024 budget for demand, so that we won't have to have reallocations of this size.
Thank you. So you sort of nicely touched on some of the points I think the committee might, and ultimately the board might be concerned with, is just the order of magnitude changes to the demand budget, which I think we'd like to have over time a better understanding of like how much of that is just like fluctuation of unusual spike in certain requests versus we're just generally trending much higher than we anticipated from a budgeting perspective. If I look at the demand capital line item in the report, I'm looking at page 85, COXX demand capital, and I see that we'd originally budgeted 31 million and we're at 120 million. And then I look at the Q3 adjustment, which you're requesting today is the 36 million. Without sort of looking back on past reports, is the additional overage, was those previous approved for Q1 and Q2? Is that basically the Q3 reconciliation to get that number to be equal? Is that a fair comment?
Through the chair, correct.
Okay.
And I would like to point out that when the 2023 budget was done, we did underestimate demand capital, and that's what I said we've corrected for 2024.
Yeah, I think big picture, understanding we may be over under budget based on, a forecast, the order of magnitude is concerning, as well as just understanding there's a key difference between demand capital that's small repairs and capital that goes to the the state of good repair and FCI, and FCI is a key benchmark for us, so we want to just make sure we're crystal clear on where that capital is going and the ultimate impact, and we're obviously forecasting out a number of years, so the changes today have sort of big impacts potentially.
Through the chair, absolutely understood, and we recognize that the amount of demand capital has increased significantly, and that's something that we are working with, as I mentioned, to reduce. It is true that there has been there's a significant amount of small capital between the $1,500 to $5,000 mark. Our limit currently that we have for the maintenance versus capital threshold is $1,500, which is low. Regardless, that's still what our threshold is. We are working with the city to see if we will be able to make a change to that. It wouldn't happen in 2024, but it would happen hopefully in 2025. I do have to caution that there are impacts, though, to doing that, because it does put additional pressure, probably in the $30 to $40 million range, if we were to continue at this pace on the operating side of the business, which is of concern. So it's a multi-pronged approach, one of looking at what can we do to reduce the amount of demand spending, which we are working on plans for that in terms of the triaging of work, the prioritizing of work, to reduce the amount that's going into the demand side of things. Then also working with our partners in the city to discuss reviewing the threshold that we have for the maintenance capital split. And then we have put in place additional budgetary controls, working with our partners in operations in terms of establishing a budget for the small capital repairs for each of the regions. That has been put in place for 2024, as well as the to ensure that operations understands where they are at any point in time. We have started providing weekly reporting on that to our partners in operations so that they can get a solid understanding of what's going through the account, what's being charged to the account. They get that on a weekly basis, so then that helps provide more timely information to them so that they can see where the trends are going sooner rather than later. Traditionally, reporting was done on a monthly basis, and we don't get the reporting until the following month, sort of middle towards the end of the month. By that time, it's a lot of water's already gone under the bridge. So we hope that with the weekly reporting that it will provide a more timely review for the staff to be able to monitor and react.
Appreciate that. In my mind, I guess there's two big thoughts. One, to reduce demand spending, if the work needs to get done, it needs to get done. Can we do it cheaper? And hopefully through our, I don't know the right word, modernization or evolution of our procurement process, we can, because I don't think we can reduce the work. It's just a question of the cost of the work. Can we do a better job over time to do that? Part one. And then part two, you highlighted, if it's not coming from the state of good repair capital budget, it's coming from the operating budget. We're already in a tight financial situation. My preference is certainly to call a spade, and that if that is operating, repair, and maintenance capital, and we need more of it, we need to call that out. And because the state of good repair and the FCI, there's certain expectations with that, and so we need to deliver on that. And if we need more R&M money, operating wise, we should say that, and that might create more pressure in the system, but it's sort of the right way to think about it in terms of capital allocation, big picture. Any other questions from the committee members on this topic?
Mr. Chair, the only piece.
Sorry, did you have a question, Brian?
No, I just wanted to second your comments. I agree 100% with you.
Appreciate that. Go ahead, Darragh.
The only additional piece of information that we wanted to bring to the committee was that Alan and his team have continued the work in relation to these reports. And as a result, we're in a position where by the Q4 report, which wasn't available by the agenda deadline, or the report deadline for this meeting is now ready. And if the committee has no objection, we propose to put that on the agenda for the upcoming board meeting on the 15th of February. And then we can start at subsequent meetings of this committee looking at the current year rather than last year.
And remind me, the Q3 report, assuming approval by BIFAC, will that go to the board?
It will.
Yeah, so
Q3 and 4 at the same meeting.
I think that's a good idea. And does anyone have any objections? Basically, what we've reviewed, discussed at Q3 at this meeting. If it is approved, it goes to the board. The offer is to also include the Q4 report to go to the board at the same time, sort of somewhat skipping BIFAC, but making a more timely submission to the board. I think that's appropriate in this circumstance. Okay, with that, unless there's any other questions, I'll ask for a motion to approve. Thank you, John. Seconder. Thank you, Naram. All in favor? Carried. What do we have next? Okay, we'll go to item 12, which I will, strategic procurement update. So a nice lead in from Demand Capital, who's gonna, maybe someone could provide us, I think I've got one or two questions, but I appreciate sort of just an overview. There's a sort of a lot going on in the report in the sense of activity, so it would be great to get an overview from the appropriate person on that for the committee.
Yeah. Through the chair, I can provide an overview. So this is in regards to an earlier ask for increasing increasing TCHC's ability to attract mid-sized vendors. And so the recommendations on the report are 4. The first one being to increase our vendor outreach program. And so we're in the process of drafting the steps where it would be deemed acceptable to do vendor outreaches, whether it's prior to posting a competition. I think to an earlier point that was made, just making sure that during or after the posting has happened, vendors are clear and are aware that the competition has been posted. After the competition has closed, we can also reach out to vendors who chose not to compete to find out more details about why and maybe improve on our process going forward.
You're going to take John's job. 5 vendors couldn't.
So we're in the process of kind of putting that all together. We've started piloting the prior to posting vendor outreach, and we've gotten some really amazing feedback from our suppliers, both new and current. They're very pleased to see that we're reaching out, and they're now made very well aware of the postings. The second recommendation here is to visit the minimum thresholds that are placed on certain projects. Not all projects will be applicable. So certain projects currently have a minimum threshold imposed, which limits the number of vendors that can actually participate in the competition, and this is being looked into at this time.
Sorry, if you don't mind, I'll interrupt with a question.
Yes, please. Go for it.
So I'm assuming that means you're going to do a review of those tenders and determine whether the minimum threshold can be lowered and or eliminated. I may have misread the report. It did come across to me like the minimum thresholds are going to be eliminated, but they're not necessarily going to be eliminated for all, because there will be there will be minimum thresholds case by case depending on, but you're going to do a thorough review of whether those minimum thresholds need to be updated.
Understanding is correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah, it applies in certain cases, so yeah. Okay, so thank you. So I'll continue maybe with the third recommendation, which is to leverage RFIs. RFIs are a procurement process. However, it is not an evaluated or scored procurement process. It typically starts off by a market gathering session, whether it be informal or formal, meaning we request documents from our suppliers to give us an idea of what the industry looks like today as opposed to 3 years ago. And then from there, we base a more clearer scope of work for a competitive process because it's based on what the industry standards are. And then basically that's going to be also revisited on a case-to-case basis because an RFI, while short in nature, maybe 2 to 3 weeks at most, still requires the additional time, and we have to make sure we're providing the appropriate time for every project. The last one recommended here is, the one before the last, supplier outreach days. Those will be in consultation with the City of Toronto. So we are attending the city purchasing group meetings on a quarterly basis or so. So we're hoping that all the rest of the CPG group will be excited about this one. We're looking forward to plagiarizing, for lack of a better way to say it, an outreach or supplier outreach that was conducted by Durham Co-op just last year, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So I'm hoping to outline the same kind of process to them and see if that's accepted, and we go from there. Basically, in essence, it's the suppliers coming over to present to TCHC as well as all the other CPG members. And that gives us perspective on who our mid-sized vendors are. And the last recommendation is to leverage the co-op purchasing and buying groups, which we are in the process of doing at the moment. I think that brings us to the end of this. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions on that one. So.
Questions from committee members? So from my perspective, I think this is really interesting, engaging. You know, there's so many tenders. This is such a big part of our spend. You know, can we do it better by increasing? How will we know we're effective or successful? Like, do we have, and maybe we haven't gotten to the stage of creating the metrics, but what type of metrics should we expect in terms of just the average number of vendors applying, generating lower pricing? Like how are we going to think about what success is in terms of these initiatives?
That's a great question because without an obvious platform to manage this, it is harder, to your point. And through the chair, sorry, I believe once the contract lifecycle management tool is in place, all of this will be easily tracked. So we're going to have an exact number of who or which vendors are through co-op agreements, which vendors have been participating in supplier outreach days if we did them. The others were the RFIs, so we'll capture all the RFIs in that contract lifecycle platform, so we'll actually know which projects had an RFI, which hasn't, and the outcomes. So it'll be, once we have it in place, I think the reporting that comes out of it, which I'm familiar from my previous tenure, is just absolutely phenomenal. It gives an entire perspective about all of TCHC's environment when it comes to our vendors.
So I guess I would encourage maybe for next meeting or just give some, what are some metrics, even if we don't have all the data today, are there some metrics where we can track high level some progress?
Yep.
And then second question, the timing of that implementation of being able to have data and analytics.
It's imminent.
Imminent.
Yeah, imminent.
Like next quarter or 2024?
No, we're this quarter and hoping to have it in place. And upload the data will be the trickiest part because that's a huge amount of work, and data integrity is another. So I'm really hoping by Q3 we've got everything in place.
So I don't think we need an action item for the committee, but I would just ask for a follow-up at some point in terms of how it's going, and again, when appropriate, some KPIs and metrics, because the size of organization, the number of tenders, it seems sort of rich for opportunity to sort of have some data analytics to understand progress.
Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. We can define the metrics such as like the volume frequency and also the numbers of the medium or small size vendors as a percentage of our total vendor population. The other piece is going to be the financial benefits, but financial benefits can be double-edged sword because oftentimes for the small and medium-sized enterprises, we're more focusing on the social procurement component. It's a social outcome and also provide the increased employment opportunity or the bidding opportunity, for example, for our tenants or tenants-led firms, that kind of stuff. So we will bring that back to the committee.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? I think this is for information. I'll ask for a motion to receive. Thank you, John. Seconder. Thank you, Naram. All in favor? Carried. I think that brings us to the conclusion of the public meeting. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the public meeting. Thank you, John. Seconder. Thank you, Naram. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for everyone who attended on the live stream of the public session.